So what you're about to see is probably the worst game of chess played by any one player in a tournament, maybe ever. So one of the first videos that I published on my channel was a video titled My Best Tournament Win, where I broke down what I think is my best tournament game of all time. Not a very good video, don't watch it. But having been inspired by my recent awful form, I've decided to make the opposite video and show you my worst tournament game of all time. This is a game from the third round of the 2019 US Amateur Team East Tournament, which, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the biggest team tournaments in the country. It's once a year on President's Day weekend. On this occasion, I was playing with the Rutgers University team. I was the third board, rated about 1936. And in the third round, we came up against a Naval Academy team. They're actually all in uniform. And we had a pretty strong team with an average rating just under 2,000. And their average rating was much lower. So we were obviously the favorites. And my opponent, whose name is Noah, unfortunately I don't have a picture of him, but his rating was about 500 points below mine. So I was going into the game with a sense of confidence. The previous round, I had beaten someone that was higher than my rating, so I was thinking, I'm playing someone that's way below, not going to be a problem. So I'm already underestimating my opponent, and the game hasn't even begun. So that's my first mistake. And because I was considering myself such a favorite, I decided to try something that I would not usually play in a tournament game. Rather than play the standard e4, which was my typical opening approach at the time, I decided to go for an opening that I had played almost exclusively in blitz games. 1b4, which has many names including the Polish opening, the orangutan, and I think most fittingly for this game, the boomerang. Now to give you an idea of how dubious this opening is, the engine already evaluates this position as almost a point in black's favor. The reason is because white is not contesting the center yet, they're not developing their knights, they're not really opening up their bishops. But the idea is that white is going to play bishop to b2, putting the bishop on this good diagonal. And then, after developing their pieces, we'll expand on the queen side and typically have a pretty good space advantage. And before I get into the actual game, there's sort of a trap that you should be familiar with in case you ever see this opening. If black plays e5, the most standard move, then white will play bishop b2, hitting the pawn. And now the safest move here is actually d6, because if you play knight to c6, it's actually falling into the trap because white can play b5, attacking this knight, and the knight is obviously defending this pawn, so if it goes back, the bishop can pick up the pawn. But if the knight goes into the center, then we have e3, again attacking the knight, and the knight can't capture because it opens up the bishop. So after the knight goes back, now we win this pawn. So that's something you got to look out for in case you ever come up against this opening. But other than that, pretty much any move for black is fine. You can play e5, d5, or what my opponent played in the game, c6. So I simply continued, bishop b2, and he played d5. So essentially he's playing this sort of like a Queen's Gambit decline type system where he's going to have the pawns this way and this way. And so I played e3, opening up space for my bishop to come out, and he plays knight to f6. He doesn't need to be a genius to realize that he just has to play very simple moves here. So I play c4, and now he plays bishop to g4, already kind of catching me off guard, because typically the bishop doesn't attack the queen so early. And I didn't really want to play bishop e2, although this would have been perfectly fine. Instead I played queen to b3, now putting more pressure here. So he just defended with e6, and now I attacked his bishop, he retreated, and now I played knight to f3. So far so good. Development is proceeding okay. Now he plays knight to d7, and at this point I should have probably just played bishop e2 and just castled as quickly as possible, because the longer the king stays in the middle, the more vulnerable it's going to become. And instead I played d4, just looking to expand in the center and not give him a chance to contest with any kind of pawn breaks like e5 and c5. But at the same time, I'm still a few moves away from castling, and if he can start to attack me on the queen side, I could be in a lot of trouble. And so he plays a5. A very good move, looking to attack this pawn, which is already being eyed by the bishop. And if I go forward, he can throw me this check. And if I block, he can already put a lot of pressure here. That would not be a great way to start the game. So instead I played a3, just protecting this pawn. And so he took it, I recaptured, and we traded rooks. And now he played bishop to e7, just pretty much finishing his development. He is now one step away from castling. I could also be one step away from castling if I were to play bishop to e2. But no, I had to play knight to d2 for whatever reason. I guess I just wanted my pawn to be better defended or something. I really don't know. Bishop e2 would have been probably a lot better. So he castles. And here, what I probably should have played was pawn to c5. Just kind of closing off the center and making sure that this pawn is no longer a target. For example, after c5, if he tries to attack me with like queen to a8, I can just move the bishop out the way, and I'm fine. If he plays b6, I can just ignore him. My pawn is well protected. But instead I played bishop to e2, thinking, okay, I'm going to castle next move. I'm going to bring my bishop in, slide the rook over, and I'm going to contest on the queen side and try to slowly hammer away at his weaknesses. But, to my surprise, he captured on c4. And now, already I'm a little bit off guard here. Obviously I can take with 3 different pieces here, but I wasn't sure which one is best. If I take with the queen, then he has knight to b6 attacking me, and this knight is going to come to d5. If I take with the bishop, same thing. And so I decided to take with the knight. But now that the c-pawn is gone, he seizes the opportunity to play knight to d5, unleashing 2 attackers on my b-pawn, which has become very weak. And what I should have done here is probably just play bishop to c3. I would be giving up my bishop, but at least this is now under control. I can castle next, and I'm going to be fine. But I didn't want to give up my bishop, which is potentially still very promising in this game, so I played b5, forgetting that he can just play bishop to b4 check, attacking my king, and this is already very bad. I still wanted to castle, so I decided to move the knight to block, but this is where my position just starts to crumble. Because the bishop is now in the way of my queen eyeing the pawn, he is now able to just take. And like I said, my position is about to disintegrate here. The knight is very important because it protects the other knight. And without it, he can take here and my king is out in the open. And this knight really doesn't have any good spaces to go. If it goes back here, then he can come in with queen to a5, attack here, and also attack my bishop. I'm losing a piece. And the only other option I saw was to play knight to e5. But now he just took, I took, and he played queen to a5 anyway. And believe it or not, I resigned here because my position is in complete shambles. Again, the bishop is hit, the knight is hit, and even against a 1400, I'm not going to stand much of a chance down a piece and down against 2 pass pawns. For example, if I just castle here, yeah, I'm defending the bishop, but he's just going to take my knight, and this is just such a bad position. I mean, yeah, I can win a pawn back, but the rook is going to come over. There's very little hope of me creating counterplay. So yeah, I resigned after 18 moves, and in a tournament where games can go up to 5 hours, this game lasted about 40 minutes. And the main lesson I learned is that you shouldn't play such dubious openings, even against weaker players, unless you're just the absolute expert on the opening, because as you can see here, something went clearly very wrong for me. I didn't castle in time, I didn't close off his counterattacking chances, just played very bad, and got very quickly punished for my mistakes. So I hope you enjoyed witnessing my biggest L of all time, and stay tuned for hopefully some better quality games in the future.